Jason Gilbo. With me here is Brent Hyde, and taking a look at tonight's 15-game slate on FanDuel and DraftKings. Really solid slate here. Got some decent pitching options up top, but there's a lot of ways to go here tonight.
Yeah, there really is. There's a lot of good pitching options up top, a lot of good pitching options in the middle, and a couple towards the bottom. We have an interesting game being played in Mexico City, and a lot of windy situations in some of these games. So it should be a very fun night of baseball.
Yeah. Let's take in this first one here. Washington taking on Philly. Gio Gonzalez and Nick Pivetta. Gio Gonzalez, 10-2 on DraftKings. I feel like he's in the spot where obviously he can showcase some upside. I don't love the price, but I think he's an interesting GPP option tonight.
I do actually. I like him in tournaments here. He is a guy that, we've seen his strikeout rate increase up to about 25% this season. We know the Phillies are a team that's striking out a decent amount, 23.3% on the season. They're generally worse on the road. Biggest concern is that, the wind is blowing out about 15 miles per hour in that stadium. That being said, outside of Rhys Hoskins, I'm not really worried about too many of these Phillies hitters in this spot. So I think Gonzalez is a guy that he can actually notch a pretty solid game.
Yeah, there's definitely some strikeout upside. And like you said, the only bat that you're really concerned with here is Hoskins, and he's the only one that I have interest in. I like him especially tonight because I think he's going to get buried, just given that there's so many outfield options.
Yeah, I completely agree there. And I wouldn't necessarily say no to a Cesar Hernandez as a cash game option just because he's just such a good hitter and has such a safe floor.
Yeah. Anyone else there?
No.
Washington side of things here, Nick Pivetta has obviously been pretty decent this year. A guy who's improved a little bit. Still lefties get to him a little bit here. But I'm not thrilled with this Washington side of things. It is the usual guys. If you want to continue the Bryce Harper in the leadoff spot or using Matt Adams, go for it. But those are probably the only guys that I have interest in.
I love the Nationals in this spot, actually. Pivetta dating back to last year. I know he's been better this season, but I'm still lumping in last year's sample size too because we still only have a very small sample this season. 377 WOBA allowed to right-handed hitters last season, 37% hard contact, 2.24 homers per nine. I love the Washington right-handed hitters in the spot. That starts with Trey Turner. Profiles as an excellent bat against him at 246 ISO against his four-seam fastball, 227 ISO against his slider. And we know Turner is a guy that hits right-handers pretty well. Howie Kendrick has been awesome this season. He posted a 313 ISO against sliders. I love him in the spot. And Ryan Zimmerman finally turned things around. He's interesting here too. Hit a homer off a slider last night, and that's a pitch that Pivetta has been throwing a decent amount to right-handed hitters. So he posted a solid ISO against it last season as well. So I love the righties, and obviously you would be crazy to overlook Bryce Harper if you're stacking here.
Yeah. So you are off Pivetta here. You're not buying into 2018 at all.
I'm buying into the larger sample that he's really struggled against righties, and until he proves otherwise, I'm going to continue. And even if you look at it, let me pull up his pitch numbers here. Against righties this season with his curveball, starting 25% of the time, 222 ISO against it. I don't know. I just don't know that I completely buy into his resurgence this year.
I don't know. It's just for me, he's missing a ton of bats this year. I don't know. He's not allowing a ton of hard contact to right-handers, but I guess, if you are looking at larger sample size, I completely agree if you want to roll that. I just do think he's an improved arm for this year, so I'm kind of off the righties here. But larger sample size, I definitely would agree.
Yeah, he very well could be, but again, we're only talking a very small sample here, so I'm still going to go off of the larger sample and that he really struggled against righties.
So yeah, as you mentioned, Zimmerman, you said Kendrick and Turner.
Yeah, and even Wilmer Defoe down in the 9 hole, he's been hitting really well since he's been moved down there.
Cleveland, New York next here. Josh Tomlin take on CC Sabathia. It doesn't matter what splits you look at for Tomlin. He's awful, and the Yankees are going to be a popular team to stack, and a team that I'm not really looking to fade here tonight. I want some exposure in every lineup.
I do as well, and that starts, I think, with the number one option for me is Didi Gregorius. I absolutely love him in this spot. Josh Tomlin, dating back to last season, 2.03 home runs per 9 allowed, 385 WOBA allowed, almost 41% hard contact allowed to lefties. That just screams just insanely good spot for Didi Gregorius, who has a 263 ISO against right-handed pitching dating back to last season. I absolutely love him in this spot, and you can't go wrong even with like Gardner. Aaron Hicks is a guy you and I were talking about, a cheap way to get exposure to the Yankees without breaking the bank.
Yeah, like all those guys, right in that mid 3.5 range. Obviously you have guys like Stanton and Judge. Andujar's back down at 3,600. He got up close to 4K and then went back down again.
Yeah, well, he's been a little bit bad recently.
But yeah, obviously the Yankees bats are in play here on both sides. They're going to be popular. I don't really see any way around of getting a less chalky New York player, maybe outside of like Hicks.
I don't think people are going to play Gardner. Like that would be the guy that I think most people would be off of, because you can't really fit Stanton, Judge, Hicks, and Gardner in your lineup unless you're playing on like fantasy drafts. So he's probably going to be the lowest owned of the outfielders. I think even lower owned than Hicks.
Any other guys here?
Sanchez, top catcher option on the board, I think. Obviously, he's obliterated cutters at 241 ISO against the pitch last season, and that's kind of where Josh Tomlin's issues lie, with his cutter.
Cleveland side of things here, I feel like if you're looking to use Cleveland, it could be kind of a frustrating night. CC Sabathia is just a guy who just doesn't allow a ton of hard contact at this point. Like, he just limits damage. He's such a guy that you just, DFS-wise, you just don't like targeting right now. But I do think Cleveland will come in a little bit underowned if you want to get some of the right-handed bats, though, to be contrarian.
I guess. Like, I don't really have any interest in taking anyone against CC Sabathia. The Indians, not a team that's been very good against lefties this season. They're sub 100 WRC plus. They're hitting the ball pretty hard, 38% hard contact, but they're just not doing a whole lot of damage. I actually think CC Sabathia is in play here, especially at his really, really cheap price. Like on DraftKings, he's 6,500. Like, I don't necessarily think. I think he's a pretty solid option. I think he's fairly safe in this spot too. So, if you wanted to get like a Jose Ramirez or Francisco Lindor or Yan Gomes, go for it. But like, I'm more inclined to roll out CC over any Indians bats.
Yeah, like it was just Lindor and E5 here for me, just because their numbers against sliders are very solid. Cardinals had 274 ISO against sliders dating back to 2016. Lindor 247 ISO. Both those guys make reasonable contact against the pitch. And you look at CC, throwing that pitch about 31% of the time. That would pretty much be it here. But like you said, I'm not thrilled with Cleveland. Just never thrilled with anyone against CC, but those would be the two guys.
Yeah, and I guess if you really like, Brandon Geyer's the platoon guy that's going to get in the lineup, and he's going to be dirt cheap, but he's going to bat towards the bottom. Yeah.
Miami, Cincinnati here. Sal Romano taking on Wei Yin Chen. I like some bats in this game here. Good ballpark. Two below average pitchers. I don't mind getting some exposure here, and there are some cheap guys you can go with.
Yeah, there's a lot of cheap bats from this game that I think you can target. Like, it's kind of weird when you look at like Wei Yin Chen's numbers dating back to last season. He doesn't really have any discernible like major issues, like a 285 WOBA allowed to righties, a 251 WOBA allowed to lefties, a little bit of a hard contact to righties with 35%, lefties 24%, but like not a whole lot of home runs or anything like that given up. And then you look at his game logs from last season, and it's just a bunch of earned runs across the board. So I think this is a spot where you can stack against him, and a good park. And I think the wind is blowing out. It's just kind of crazy. Like, whenever you look at his numbers, it doesn't look like he's a bad pitcher.
Yeah. 2017 played 33 innings, 5 innings so far this year. So hasn't had a huge sample size dating back to last season, but like we know, fly ball pitcher, not a big strikeout guy. In this ballpark, like there is potential for guys like Duvall. I think he's an interesting GPP play tonight. His numbers against lefties always stand out. Eugenio Suarez, I really like here against Chen. But that's kind of about it from the other side, unless you want to like a Devin Mesoraco or something.
Yeah, he would be a guy that I would have a little bit of interest in if he even makes the lineup, just as a power option. And then you mentioned Adam Duvall. I wouldn't hate like Joey Votto, even though it's a lefty on lefty matchup. Anyone else that kind of gets in that lineup, like you might see Alex Blandino down towards the bottom of that lineup. He's a cheap bat that you can consider. He's actually been hitting a little bit better recently, so I don't necessarily hate him. I'm trying to see who else might get in that lineup that we could look at. Like,
Yeah, like because you're probably gonna have, I don't know, would see Peraza up there, but he's not a guy I have a ton of interest. He's had a couple big games of late. Like if you're looking to stack, I don't hate it. Because like Peraza, Votto, Suarez, Duvall stack is something that I'm looking at here.
yeah, like I was sitting here trying to figure out who I could stack, and then like I look at some of these bats, I'm like, I don't know. So I might just stick with like Suarez, Duvall, and maybe Mesoraco, and then throwing in like a Votto.
Yeah. Miami side of things here, Sal Romano, dating back to last year, allowing about a 180 ISO to both sides of the plate. He's fairly neutral, hard contact, much more on the left side, though. But I still like guys like Jitiro Muto, Justin Bohr here, 3,500 on DK. I like him a ton.
Yeah, it's a really good spot, and he's an interesting bat to target us at like first base as just like a guy that you feel like is going to hit a home run. He mashed sliders last year with a 447 ISO against him, and Romano's throwing that pitch about 24% of the time to left-handed hitters. So it's a good spot for Bohr. I like Real Muto. You mentioned him, Starlin Castro, Dietrich, Brian Anderson. All these guys are really cheap, and they're decent options here.
Yeah, good ballpark. Guys I'm going to be probably filling lineups with, I need a cheap second baseman. Castro could be that guy. I need, Bohr. Like, those are the guys I'm going to be really looking to use tonight.
Yeah, for sure.
Toronto and Tampa Bay. It's a bullpen day here for Tampa, which seems to be about every day. But Jay Happ on the other side. Jay Happ's just absolutely been cruising so far this year. You and I both a little worried here. Like it could potentially kind of hit not a wall, but we could kind of start to see maybe Happ slow down a bit. I think this matchup is it's not a gimme here.
It really isn't. The Rays over the past 2 weeks. I pulled this last night, and I don't know if it's still the same, but they led the majors in WRC plus over the last 2 weeks. They've been the hottest team in baseball, really. It's not. Yeah, they're still number one ahead of the Mariners. It's not just a lock and load spot for Happ. I know he's been really good. I know he's been striking out a ton of batters. He has struggled a few times with some earned runs allowed, but he's been able to offset that with the strikeouts. It's obviously a good park to be playing in. He has a decent chance at the win, given that this is a bullpen game, even though I don't think Kittredge is a terrible, terrible pitcher. There's risk here, but there's also a little bit of strikeout potential for him.
Yeah, like you look, the Rays projected lineup tonight, 24.7% strikeout rate against lefties so far this year. They do have some strikeout bats, but guys like Robertson and Duffy and Crone, these guys are decent bats against left-handers. So I'm fine. I think Happ at 11.7 is maybe where I kind of hop off a bit here and go some other directions.
Yeah, I kind of I'm feeling the same way. Like I don't necessarily. I think the Rays actually made it in as one of my value stacks in the cheat sheets, just because like CJ Crone, Wilson Ramos, Robertson, these guys are really really cheap, and you could even throw in like a Danny Echeverria and Johnny Field if he makes a lineup. Alex Smith, any of these guys could end up being viable bats here.
Yeah, they're really good. A good way to be contrarian tonight. And I don't even mind the Toronto side here. Like, obviously, geez, that doubleheader yesterday, some of those guys absolutely popped off. Donaldson, Solarte. I don't mind some of them here. I am intrigued with Donaldson a lot, but I do like Solarte, and Teoscar Hernandez is a guy I do have some interest in here too as well.
I really like Teoscar Hernandez in the spot. We're talking about a guy with like almost 41% hard contact against right-handed pitching this season. He's striking out 26% of the time, but still has like a 373 ISO. He's one of the few guys that has actually hit sliders pretty good this season. Kittredge is a guy that's throwing a slider a ton. 52% of the time this season he's throwing a slider. It's not a great slider, but he's throwing it a lot. And Hernandez is freaking just obliterating him. He has like a 500 ISO against him this season. So I like him. I like Aledmus Diaz down at the bottom of that order. You mentioned Donaldson now that he's back in the lineup. Good spot for him. And Solarte obviously is one of those guys, continues just to never have his price go up.
No, and like the thing that sucks is like Donaldson and Solante both third base,
Yeah, that does kind of suck
but you do have your options there. So
for sure.
Colorado and New York, you got Zach Wheeler take on German Marquez. This game's, I think, somewhat interesting here. You got wind blowing out there. Vegas not loving it, but some of these prices on the Mets, and even some of the guys on the Rockies here, like I think you can get some contrarian bats in this spot.
I don't have a lot of interest in a whole lot of the bats from this game, at least not from like the Mets side of things. Like Marquez is not like he's not like a high upside pitcher, but he's also just not a guy that gives up a ton of runs. Like I think he's given up a maximum of 2 runs in all of his outings this season. Like I know the wind is blowing out, and that's a little bit concerning when you look at his numbers against righties. 37% hard contact, 363 WOBA allowed. So if I'm looking at anyone here, it's going to be the right-handed bats from the Mets side of this game.
Yeah, like I really, really like Cespedes here tonight. A guy who's hit curveballs really well. That's something Marquez has thrown a lot this season, 30% of the time. Cespedes 432 well at 361 ISO against curveballs, same at 2016.
Yeah, and I did misspeak in his road games. So he's 3 road games this season. He's allowed a maximum of 2 runs. Like I don't want people to look and be like, he gave up 7 against the Braves and 6 against the Cubs. Those were Coors games.
But like, I mean, I still like, Asdrubal Cabrera. Like you said, you would like the right side here more. Nemo's projected to be in the lineup. Like I think there are a couple options you can go with here if you need some cheap guys. More one-offs here than stacking, of course.
Yeah, I would be looking at Cespedes, as you mentioned, Frazier, another guy that you can look at, Ahmed Rosario, another solid bat that you can look at. I prefer him against lefties, but you could still consider him. And Frazier, the fly balls for Frazier and Cespedes are what's interesting here, just because with that wind blowing out, you could see them carry.
Yeah, you could. Colorado side of things here, Wheeler has not been bad this year. Hard contact still up a little bit to lefties. I don't mind like the David Dahls and Cargos here, or Blackmans. Like I think the 3 left-handed outfielders I like as one-offs.
That's exactly how I feel. Like I do like Dahl in the spot. Obviously, we know the strikeouts are going to be an issue for him, but like his numbers against righties, we don't have a sample for last season, so we just have this season. But 606 WOBA, 467 ISO, a little bit inflated because of Coors and whatnot, but still, he's still a good hitter against righties. Good spot for him. I love this spot for Blackman, especially like if he gets on base and like Lobaton's behind the dish. I know Nito is projected, but if Lobaton's behind the dish, stolen base potential for Blackman here.
Yeah, definitely. Did you have any interest in pitchers at all? Like, I think Zach Wheeler might be like a guy people may look at just because of Colorado's strikeout rate, but I'm off.
I have Marquez as a guy like just a value SP2 tournament option.
What's his price tag? Oh, yeah, 6,200.
6,200.
San Francisco, Atlanta, Mike Foltynewicz taking on Chris Stratton. I like the Braves here. I know Stratton hasn't been that bad, but he is still giving up a crazy amount of hard contact, and I'm kind of rolling with Atlanta here as like my non-Boston, non-New York stacks is my top one.
Yeah, obviously you have to consider Ronald Acuna, who has just been obliterating everything that's thrown his way. I mean, 454 WOBA, 280 ISO against right-handed pitching. So far this season, he's a great option. I don't know that I'm going to have a ton of interest in the Braves, just because like I know Stratton has been giving up some hard contact this season, but dating back to last season, it hasn't been that bad. It's about 30, a little over 30% to both sides of the plate. I don't know. Again, we don't have a large sample for last season or this season, so it's one of those which one is actually true. But the Braves, if you want to roll them out as a tournament stack, I think are fine.
Like I just find looking at Stratton this year, he's thrown that fastball about over 50% of the time. I'm just not buying that it's been this solid. Like he's only allowed a 224 WOBA, 108 ISO off it, but 40% hard contact rate, 32% ground ball rate, average distance 304. Like I think he's been lucky this year in terms of, some possible complete blowups. And obviously playing in San Francisco and in that division in general is going to help. So I do like some of these guys, Albies, Freeman, Acuna, Kurt Suzuki continues to be mashing and just underpriced. Just a joke here, but Jose Bautista back up in the majors for tonight's game.
Yeah, I know we're kind of joking about that, but I guess on FanDuel he's not cheap. He's 3,500. Let me see if he's even in the player pool or on DraftKings. He's not cheap. Let me see if he's in the player pool.
He's not on Yahoo or FanDuel.
Imagine that.
Yeah, what guy who's playing the majors for 12 years?
Yeah, not in the player pool. Good job. So I would look at again Freddie Acuna. Albies, I don't hate, like Markakis raked freaking yesterday. You can roll him out too. Like, it's kind of interesting. I like Albies in that leadoff spot for sure if he's going to continue to lead off.
You know what's funny is Markakis' ISO against righties is 10 points lower than Freeman's.
Yeah.
So maybe we should stop making fun of Markakis.
We probably should.
Giant side of things here. I don't really have any interest in these bats. I maybe would like Fulte if he wasn't 9,400, but I don't really like some of these bats. I mean, Brandon Belt, it may be a guy that you can look at, but I'm not thrilled.
I like Fulte more on like FanDuel where he's 8,100 if you're trying to pay down at pitcher, or like on Fantasy Draft because I know he's pretty cheap over there as well. He's 18-1. I think he still has strikeout potential against this Giants team that has really just been striking out a lot. And is McCutchen back? Like, I know he left the game the other day.
I think he's still day to day.
If he's out of that lineup, that's just you're going to get another like probably high strikeout bat in the lineup against Fulte. Like, I think he's a fine option here if you're wanting to fade high dollar pitching. And Belt's the only guy that I'm really necessarily worried about. Maybe Blanco as a cheap option, but none of these bats for the Giants really stand out.
No, they don't. Boston, Texas, Bartolo Colon on the hill, take on Rick Porcello. Let's talk, pitcher or Rick Porcello. I don't mind him. 10-8 I feel like is a little expensive. He's kind of doing what he's been doing that year he won the Cy Young. There is some upside here in this spot, though, but I think I'm going to be elsewhere just because he's too high priced, I think, for me.
If you're not cramming in a bunch of high-priced bats, I think he's a fine option if you're wanting to go cash or tournaments. This Texas team, I know they got to David Price last night, but that's because David Price is like a shell of himself and is just a bad pitcher now. The Rangers still striking out 25% of the time against right-handed pitching. Porcello has been pretty darn good this season. I'm starting to buy into it a little bit. I honestly don't know that there's a whole lot of guys that I'm worried about in that lineup. Like Nomar and Gallo presents a little bit of a challenge, but just because their numbers against the slider and changeup are pretty solid. But there's a lot of hitters in that lineup with like a 15% or more swing strike percentage against like Porcello's like pitch mix.
Yeah, they're definitely a strikeout upside. Like if you have money to go up and get them, like I'm fine with it. Like you said, the only bats that you really worry about were a couple of lefties, and even Porcello against lefties this year has been really solid. Back to kind of not allowing a ton of hard contact, and his walk rate is just superb. Like he's been phenomenal. He's not allowing a ton of base runners.
No, he's really not. Like he's just been really good. Like his control has been absolutely phenomenal. I mean, 4 walks and 38 strikeouts on the season is pretty insane.
Yeah. And then we got the other side of this one, Bartolo Colon. How many home runs does Mookie Betts hit tonight?
None, because Big Sexy is going to no-hit the Red Sox.
Man.
You know the biggest troll game of the season is coming from Colon tonight.
Yeah, it could be. Although that Tillman against the Yankees start was also very, very – that's up there.
True.
But yes, this would be one. If we're looking back to last year, obviously over 200 ISO out of both sides of the plate. He doesn't allow a ton of hard – well, I guess he did actually last year, yeah. For some reason when I looked, I expected because he throws his fastball like 85 miles per hour. It was tough for guys to generate hard contact. But I love the right-handed bats here, but I like kind of some of the – more contrarian options like, Devers. I think Benintendi's interesting as well. Like, yes, Boston is going to be popular tonight, but I think a couple of these options you can get a little bit lower ownership.
Yeah, I think so. Like if you look dating back to last year, 40% hard contact to lefties. That puts the lefties in a good spot here. Benintendi, as you mentioned, Devers, JBJ down at the bottom of the order. I don't know what has happened to JBJ because he has like disappeared at the plate recently, but um, he's still a very viable option. Like I think when I wrote the cheat sheets, every single bat from the Boston side of this game made it in there. You can look at anyone. Like he's throwing, what is it, this two seam fastball? Pretty much that's pretty much all he's throwing at this point. Um, and like all these guys hit that pitch extremely, extremely well. Like um, Betts, where is it? Almost 400 xwOBA against it last season. That's a good start. JD Martinez mashed it last season. 333 ISO. Nunez solid numbers against it. I really like Moreland if he gets in the lineup. I hope he does. 314 ISO against two seam fastballs last season. He would be an excellent bat to consider. But literally anybody from this lineup's in play. Like if it doesn't matter who you're looking at, they all have good numbers against two seam fastballs.
Yeah, I'm loving all the bats here, like you said, 1 through 9. I mean, JBJ just continues to be rather unlucky. Like he continues to hit the ball really hard. He's got 377 xWOBA off righties this season. Average distance over 300. Like they're just not finding any spots right now. And I feel like that's been the case for like the last year.
Yeah.
So Pittsburgh, Milwaukee, kind of an interesting game here. Junior Guerra taking on Nick Kingham. Both these guys viable SP2s here tonight. You and I were kind of looking into Kingham a little bit before, and not a huge major league sample size, obviously, and looking at his minor league stuff, I mean, his minor league number is very solid.
They are very, very solid, and we obviously saw that transition into a very good outing against the Cardinals last time out. I mean, he carried a no-hitter into the 7th inning. Obviously, he has good stuff. I mean, his slider that's a new pitch for him this season was absolutely filthy. And teams, I think it was Jeff Zimmerman from Fangraphs noted that teams don't really have a scouting report on him because it is a new pitch for him. If that continues against the Brewers tonight, like I think he could end up coming out and having a good game here. I don't know what his ownership's going to be. It's kind of tough to envision him not being chalky at his price coming off a freaking 7-inning 1-hit performance where he struck out 9 hitters. I think for cash games, if you want to roll with it, feel free. In tournaments, if you want to fade him, there's a decent chance he could be popular.
Yeah, there is. And I mean, if he's going to throw the slider over 30% of the time again here, like there aren't really a lot of bats that stand out against the slider in this Milwaukee lineup. I mean, a lot of these guys under 70% contact rate as well. Not tremendous power numbers outside of like Aguilar and Braun, but that's kind of it.
Yeah, and if you look, like he did a good job of keeping guys off balance. I mean, he threw a 4-seam, a curveball, a changeup, a sinker, and that slider in that game. Like he threw everything, and they were all effective for him. So he's gonna probably have success just keeping guys off balance tonight.
Yeah, I think so. And a guy who doesn't have, didn't show any walk issues down the minors and obviously didn't show any walk issues in that first start.
No.
So, yeah, I don't really like Milwaukee bats here. I think I'm just kind of, it's going to be maybe a wash for me. Like you said, I might fade Kingham in GPPs just if he's going to be, extremely high owned, but it's not necessarily that I'm taking Milwaukee bats.
If I had any interest, it would maybe be like a Yelich or something like that. And like Shaw would normally be a guy that I would look at, but he may not even be in the lineup. So,
oh God, Shaw, yeah. Pittsburgh side of things here against Guerra. Guerra's a guy I think is somewhat interesting here tonight. I know you talked about this a handful of times lately about Pittsburgh's numbers on the road, and we've seen them kind of come back down to earth anyway of late. Get through a serviceable start here at 7,400. I don't love him, but I don't mind him here either.
Yeah, I don't really mind him either. And like, let me pull what it is now. But like, their Pittsburgh Pirates strikeout rates a couple days ago, whenever I pulled it, was like 27% on the road. They are. That can't be right. It's 2018. They are. I should have been more prepared. I apologize. 23% right now on the road overall. I'm sure if you split that to righties, it's probably a little bit more. I think he's a fine option here. Like he has a almost 22% strikeout rate dating back to last season. No like real issues with hard contact to lefties, and we know this is a very lefty heavy lineup. Obviously struggled a little bit against righties with the 36% hard contact and 2 home runs per 9 allowed. But there's not a whole lot of righties in that lineup that you're necessarily worried about. So I think this is a fine spot for Guerra, and I'm not really interested in the Pittsburgh bats.
No, none of these guys really hit splitters well either.
No.
That's no one really.
No, like I think Marte and like Cervelli are your biggest threats here, and I'm not necessarily worried about those guys.
No, I'm not either. So Minnesota, Chicago, next one here. Carson Fulmer take on Jose Barrios. I love Barrios here tonight. He's that guy that kind of pushes a lot of those options out of the way for me in that range. Has struggled a little bit of late, but I see a big bounce back spot against this Chicago team that strikes out a ton against righties.
Yeah, do you guys remember a couple days ago whenever Severino was under 10K against the Astros and we said he was just way too cheap for the upside he has in this matchup? It's the exact same thing for Barrios in the spot. I mean, he's under 10K, he's 9,800. We're talking about a guy that just has insane ability to strike hitters out. Like, this is just such an amazing spot for him. Like, I know the White Sox have some young bats in that lineup that are a little bit scary, that do hit the ball pretty darn hard. But, like, right now, they're a pretty easy lineup to get through. I mean, they're striking out 23% of the time overall this season. Like, your best bat right now is, like, Daniel Palka. And that's pretty much all you have to say about the White Sox.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, like I'm not worried here. There are a couple lefties. I think Moncada is due back in the lineup tonight. But he's a guy who can add a few strikeouts. Also, he does have a ton of pop, but I love Barrios here. I'm fine with him in all formats.
Yeah, Moncada was available to pinch hit yesterday, but didn't end up getting in the game, so he probably makes it back tonight. But still, like, even if Barrios gives up like a homer or something like that, you're still talking about a guy with 7, 8, 9 strikeouts potentially, and can go deep in this game.
Yeah. So you said you had all the interest in the world for Palka. Is that what you said?
he would be one of the only guys if he even makes the lineup. Dude's just been mashing, so that'd be about it.
Yeah. Minnesota. I love Minnesota here tonight. I love a Minnesota stack. Put him in the stacking article just because I didn't want to talk about Texas or Boston and New York. So I think Minnesota's an interesting way to go here. They're not an expensive side once again.
They're all very, very affordable outside of like Brian Dozier, who is the most expensive at like 4,600. The rest of these guys are pretty much under 4K on DraftKings. They're pretty cheap on FanDuel too, and there's a lot of bats to like in the spot. Like, we're going to talk about Eddie Rosario, who continues to profile like really well against every single pitcher imaginable. He's really good against cutters, which is a pitch that Fulmer is throwing a lot. He had 529 ISO against the pitch last season, so there's a pretty good chance he's going to mash a few of those. Kepler obliterated them as well last season with 538 ISO. I love Kepler and Rosario on the spot, but even like Logan Morrison, who is starting to heat up, is viable here, and he's really, really cheap across the industry. He's like 3,100 on DraftKings, and he's almost minimum salary, if I recall correctly, on FanDuel.
Yeah, he's down there. And I feel like Robbie Grossman gets in the lineup too, another guy who's hit cutters really well. I just like all these guys, super cheap. Eduardo Escobar continues to rake. Like, he's only 4K, third base shortstop eligibility on DK. That's priced down from where he's been the last few days.
Yeah, he's another guy. And even like Joe Mauer, not a guy with a lot of power. He did hit a home run a couple nights ago, so we have that going for him. But 211 ISO against cutters last season. Yeah,
I'm mentioning Fulmer's just a guy, majority pitches to contact, allows a ton of fly balls, and in this ballpark, it's not cold, but it's fairly warm here. I love the options here for Minnesota.
Yeah, and even a guy like Gregorio Petit, if he makes the lineup, dirt cheap option. He's another guy you can look at. He has some stolen base upside too. Yeah.
Chicago, St. Louis. I have more interest in the pitchers here from a GPP standpoint. Quintana, I feel like he might let me down here tonight, but a guy that I have a lot of interest in because I feel like he's another one who's kind of underpriced for the upside that he has. We've seen it. We've kind of seen the floor and ceiling games out of him this year. we look at this Cardinals team that, only a couple of those bats are really hitting lefties well.
My biggest issue with Quintana is there's going to be at least 5 hitters in the lineup with an ISO over 200 against southpaws dating back to last season. So there is a lot of power potential from that side, but they're also like striking out 23% of the time against left-handed pitching. And Quintana is a guy that has the ability to rack up strikeouts. So I think he's a viable tournament option just because he's so freaking cheap. It's just, I hate trying to trust Quintana. It's so frustrating.
Yeah, it really is. And, like you said, like he's cheap. There is a strong source of upside as far as strikeouts go. Yeah, not a safe cash game play. If you want to target, like I'm still okay with targeting like Tommy Pham and Jose Martinez and like Yadi. Like I think those guys are still intriguing options just because Quintana has allowed over a 170 ISO. The righties going back to last year. I think that's closer to 200 on this season alone. So I mean, you can use some Cardinals and they will come on their own tonight.
Yeah, and Jed Jerko would be another guy to look at if you're wanting to. Just another guy that mashes lefties.
Yeah. On the other side, I think Michaelis here too is in play for GPPs. Like he's 8K. This Cubs team continues to not really be that threatening. I guess I'd be a little bit more worried about the lefties just because that's where the hard contact lies. But Schwarber, Hayward, these guys aren't really making me say no. I'm not taking pitchers against them right now.
Yeah, Nicholas is, again, another guy that very, very interesting in tournaments here. I don't think you can use him in cash games. He sported the league's best walk rate and strikeout to walk rate for the season's first month, which was outstanding for him. He kind of took some people by surprise if they weren't paying attention to what he was able to do in Japan and thought he was going to be the same pitcher he was when he left. Hasn't really been that. Like he has decent strikeout stuff, a 50% ground ball rate to kind of mix in there. You mentioned hard contact to lefties, 41.1%. That's the biggest concern for him here. Whenever you have guys like Rizzo and Schwarber that can kind of hit balls really hard and far, but like those are the only 2 guys I'm really worried about here. I think Nicholas can come out and have a decent outing.
Yeah, I do too. Like I said, the lefties will be the ones that I have the option. I think Rizzo more so just because I can't envision myself playing Schwarber or Hayward over a lot of other outfield options. But Rizzo I'd have some interest in.
Yeah, I agree there.
Detroit, Kansas City next. Ian Kennedy taking on Francisco Liriano. I don't have interest in any of these pitchers. I feel like Kennedy could have a decent start because it could be a watered-down Detroit lineup, but I don't have any interest on this slate.
Like, I would love to target the Royals with Liriano just because they are still striking out a decent amount, 25%, but they're hitting the ball really freaking hard, and they're starting to improve a little bit. They're almost league average now in WRC plus against left-handed pitching, and a lot of that has to do with like Jorge Soler, who has just been absolutely just obliterating everything. Dude's mashing and is finally the hitter that I think people expected him to be. If Liriano can get around him and like Merrifield, I think he can have a decent game. But the problem is like if his control, which has been an issue for him pretty much his entire career, is not working for him, and he starts to walk a couple guys, and then like Soler comes up and it's like a three run shot, like and Liriano just struggles. So I think tournaments, again, viable option, but not someone I'm 100% comfortable in.
No, it's Liriano. It's going to be kind of a tale. Like if the slider is working, he'll be awesome. If it's not, and he's throwing that sinker a ton, I love the Royals bats here in the spot. Like I think Merrifield's intriguing. Soler, these types of guys because they all do hit sinkers well, but their numbers against sliders are just absolutely awful.
Yeah, those would be the guys to keep an eye on. Even like Cheslor Cuthbert, a guy you can look at, and it seems crazy to say this, but Alcides Escobar has been raking against lefties.
It is crazy to say.
I mean, there was a point earlier in the season, like when these teams matched up, I think the first time this season, Escobar had like a 40-something% hard contact rating against lefties. It's down to like 32%, but he was just mashing lefties earlier this season.
Anyone on the Detroit side here?
Leonis Martin, Candelario, Martinez, guys that can put the ball in the air against Kennedy just because he does have fly ball tendencies.
Yeah, but not all secondary options.
Yeah.
Yeah, not an exciting game.
No, like I think Martine's probably the most interesting. I mean, if you look at his numbers, like if you incorporate last season, they're not great, but like still a 45.5% fly ball rate. Average distance this season, 217 feet. Again, Kennedy is a guy that gives up a lot of fly balls. So that could be a guy that you could look at.
Yeah. Next game here. This is the Mexico game. San Diego taking on LA. Walker Buehler taking on Joey Lucchesi. Um, you know, this is not a ballpark that's made for pitching.
No, and at the same time, like I just don't have a lot of interest in the hitters just because like the Dodgers and Padres, like the Dodgers have just been so bad recently, and like Lucchesi is not a terrible pitcher. There is a lot of risk with him tonight because this is being played in Mexico City, where the altitude is like 1,800 feet, and that's higher than Coors, and so the ball could be flying out. But like, still, I just don't. I can't stomach playing Dodgers in this spot over some of the other really really good stacks.
Yeah, I'm with you. Like, I think I like maybe a couple one-offs. Like Lucchesi, or Lucchesi is still 38% hard contact rate to righties. Matt Kemp 3,600 is interesting. Austin Barnes 2A if he's in the lineup for second base catcher eligibility. There are a couple cheap Dodgers one-offs that I have some interest in. I'm with you. I don't have any interest in the pitchers. One, because I don't like their price tags, especially with Walker Buehler, for a guy who's kind of just hovering around that 5 inning mark. Like, there's no real upside for either of these guys.
I think Bueller might end up going a little bit deeper. The reason why he like the very first game, obviously they limited his pitches, right? They said he was only going to go like 5-6 innings, about 90 pitches. He went up to 94 in his last game. He did struggle with a couple high pitch count like at bats. The Padres are a team that are striking out a lot. There is strikeout potential, I think, for Bueller. The biggest issue is some of the right-handed bats because he is giving up a decent amount of hard contact to righties in a 4.12 WOBA. So I think in tournaments, both these guys are still viable even at their prices because there is strikeouts available to both of them.
That's the one we have to keep weather on, except we have no idea what the weather even is, apparently.
I mean, there's a decent chance that weather does have an impact on this game, but being that this is an international series, I think the league is going to do everything they can to try and get this game in. It's not going to have a whole lot of opportunities to get this game in over this 3 days.
No. So, and that's a game I am okay just fading entirely too, and not dealing with it.
Yeah, I'm okay with fading it. If I was looking at anyone, it would be like the guys that you mentioned, even maybe, I guess maybe like Kike Hernandez.
Yeah, he's 3-3 middle infield eligibility. I don't hate him either.
Oh, is he middle infield now? He's not catcher or anything.
No.
Oh, now he's second base shortstop.
Yeah, so at least you have some options.
There you go.
Yeah. Houston, Arizona, next one here. Garrett Cole taking on Chris Medlin. It's been a while since we've said Chris Medlin's name.
It's been since May 10th of 2016 since we said his name.
Yeah. It's where Houston's projected for over 5 runs here tonight. I still don't love him. I don't know what to completely expect out of Medlin here tonight. I just don't feel like I want to pay over $5K for still these Houston bats that haven't done much this year.
Yeah, I don't know that a whole lot of people know what to expect out of Medline. Again, this is a guy we have not seen pitch since freaking May 10th of 2016. Like, his numbers back then, not great. 15% strikeout rate, 6.6 K per 9. Didn't really struggle with homers. I mean, 0.74 homers per 9 allowed. If you look, lefties did kind of get to him. 378 WOBA allowed, righties 392 WOBA allowed. Some hard contact issues. So, I mean, if you want to stack Houston, go for it. Like, they're not my favorite stack, but they're going to be a very, very popular stack. I do like Marwin Gonzalez and Josh Reddick as under-owned options because I think people are going to look at the Springers and the Altuves and whatnot. So, I'm more inclined maybe to get some of the lefties that I think will be a little bit lower owned.
Yeah, I'm with you. And just at far better prices, 4K for Reddick. You mentioned Marwin, 3-4 on DK. Definitely like those guys more.
And, like, James McCann is pretty cheap, too. 3.5. Brian McCann, sorry.
We do love James McCann. Garrett Cole, I like Garrett Cole here tonight. He's one of the guys that I am okay with paying up for. I think on that Porcello hat range, I think there's, once again, tremendous amount of strikeout upside. You look at the Diamondbacks this year, 24% strikeout rate against righties. Obviously, they have a few bats, that could do some damage, but none that I'm really seeing that I would want to even take against Cole.
No, I mean we're talking about a dude like he has double digit strikeouts in what four games this season. So 4 of his 6 games he has double digit strikeouts. That's just freaking insane. The Diamondbacks are a team that we've targeted with pitchers whenever they have sliders, whenever they have good sliders, and they throw that slider a lot. Garrett Cole throwing a slider about 25% of the time this season. A lot of swinging strikes in that lineup whenever it comes to sliders. So like I love Garrett Cole in this spot. I do not mind paying up at that price for him. It's just when it comes to a guy with this much strikeout potential, it's just really tough to overlook him.
Yeah, it really is. Did you have any one hitter from Arizona at all?
No.
Not like Pollock, superstar.
No.
Baltimore, Oakland, Andrew Cashner versus Daniel Mangden. Daniel Mangden, 6'4". He's a guy who's the one knock on him, I feel like, is second time through the order and moving forward. That's kind of been his struggles this year. Like, he's a guy who cruises through 3 innings and then runs into a little bit of trouble. But at that price, Baltimore just continues to suck, and I'm just continuing to willing to take shots against them.
Yeah, whenever you have a guy facing a team that's striking out almost 26% of the time against right-handed pitching, like it's really, really tough to overlook him. And like I know he doesn't have like a ton of strikeout stuff, like the very likely outcome of maybe 5 or 6 strikeouts, which has been majority of what he's been able to do this season. But at 6,400 on DraftKings, has like an SP2 even cash game option. And it's so tough to overlook him in this spot. Like I do really like him, just because the Orioles are so bad.
Yeah, I really hope that they send out like a lot of lefties in that lineup because Mangden's reverse.
Yeah, I hope they do as well. Like you're gonna get maybe Cisco and
could be like Santander and like Alvarez and Davis and like Chase Peterson. Like you could have 4 or 5 lefties in that lineup.
You very well could, and that would make it even better.
Yeah. Machado is the only option I would still have interest in for Baltimore. I think he's obviously a guy who goes lower owned tonight, being on the West Coast. He was like 9%, I think, the other night in a good spot. So Machado's a guy that I would still have interest in.
Yeah, maybe Adam Jones.
Yeah, Adam Jones, the guy's been pretty unlucky this year.
Yeah, and he profiles pretty well in this spot, but like I'm not in love with any of the Baltimore bats.
No. A's against Andrew Cashner. I don't want Cashner to do that thing where he just tilts me all night long.
Yeah, I'm very, very worried about like this being a good Cashner start. Like I'm definitely not going to use him, and I'm definitely not going to recommend anybody using him. But like Cashner does do like what Bartolo does sometimes and just trolls everybody. I hope that doesn't happen because I do like some of these A's bats. I love Matt Olson in this spot. Profiles extremely well. Obviously, a 348 ISO against right-handed pitching dating back to last season. He posted 235 ISO against Cashner's four-seam fastball last season. Good power potential there. I love Matt Joyce in the spot as like a one-off bat, like for just a power bat in this environment. Chris Davis is striking out like 50% of the time over the past couple of weeks, which is ridiculous. I have to wonder if he's injured and he's just up there just chopping at everything. You could roll him out and expect to go like 3 strikeouts and maybe a home run. And then Jed Lowry, who is, I guess, leading the MVP race for the league so far this season because he continues to just I can't play Jed Lowry anymore. Like I can't do this.
No, I can't either. And he's been an elite option second base for most of the season. A guy who mashes sinkers. Joyce does as well. There's just a lot of options in the A's team that I am excited about. I like Olson a lot. I think Olson's a really intriguing one-off here if you're looking for power upside. Has been very boomer bust this season, but you mentioned the strikeout rate, some of these A's guys, but this is obviously a Cashner guy who doesn't miss a ton of bats either.
No, he really doesn't. I mean, we're talking about a 13.8% strikeout rate dating back to last season. So if Chris Davis does strike out 50% of the time, that's going to be a pretty impressive feat.
Yeah, if he does strike out, then something's obviously wrong because 82% contact rate from Cashner this year.
Yeah.
So there's some options there for the A's. They'll be contrarian late night guys if you want to get some exposure.
Yeah, and they're not like, I mean, Matt Olson is down under 4K. He's pretty cheap. I mentioned Matt Joyce. He's
3-1.
yeah, he's really cheap. So even Jed Lowry is 4,500 for a dude that's been like one of the best hitters in baseball. It's still pretty cheap.
Yeah. Last game of night, Angels and Mariners. Mike Leake take on Garrett Richards. I don't have interest in either of these pitchers. Do you?
No, I'm so mad at the Angels for finally waking up two days after like I had them all in my lineup and they completely stunk.
Are you going back to the well here? Because I feel like they could have a decent outing against Mike Leake.
I am probably going to go back to a few of these bats. I like Valbuena towards the bottom of this lineup. He's a guy that I do like taking against low strikeout pitchers. Excellent numbers against righties last season, 228 ISO, 353 ISO against sinkers, which is one of Leake's like primary pitches. I do like the spot for him. Mike Trout, again, is really good at baseball. Hits sliders pretty well, hits sinkers pretty well. Even hits cutters. Like whenever you look at Leake's pitch mix, especially like to righties, it's like 25% of everything. he's throwing all his pitches like 25% of the time. Trout 1.043 ISO against cutters last season. So yeah.
Yeah, for those, not, if math isn't your strong suit, that's very good.
Yeah, that is really, really good.
Yeah, I like the Angels. I like them as a stack. I like them as one-offs here tonight. Leak, I mean, just an absurd amount of hard contact this year. Like crazy, average ice velocity like over 93 to both sides of the plate this season. Obviously, if you date back to last year, 37% against righties, 33% against lefties. Like, Leak was a guy who just was frustrating, but I think things have changed a little bit.
I think it's starting to turn around a little bit, definitely, and now would be the time to hop on board.
Yeah. Seattle bats here. I just don't know what Garrett Richards is going to show up. Is it the guy who comes out and pumps, 8 strikeouts over 5 innings, or is it the guy who comes out and walks 8 over 5 innings? Like, he's just a guy I don't like targeting, but I don't like using right now.
No, I don't really want to target him too heavily. And I definitely, going back to the Angels 1 second, obviously Ohtani in a good spot. Upton and Pujols also profile extremely well here. So all of those
Pujols, one away.
He's one away. Like I put in the cheat sheets, like he's one hit away. And like I'm sure he would love nothing more for that hit to be a home run. So if you're into narrative street, there you go. But back to the Seattle side, like Ryan Healy's probably the only guy that I really have a lot of interest in.
What is that?
I mean, he just 2-seam fastballs hits him pretty well. Yeah.
Yeah, Richard's a guy I don't know. There's just not much here to really go off of. Like ground ball guy. The one thing I just hate about him using him pitching wise is the walks. It's nothing against really what he does against hitters. It's just the walks.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. And it's just really tough. Like he has strikeout potential. I mean, 27% dating back to last season. Like I think if you want to take the risk in tournaments, feel free. I think there's a lot of better options, but like I don't think you get him at like probably 2% ownership.
Yeah, it's true. All right. Home run calls. Who do you got?
Brian Dozier.
Ooh, I like it.
Matt Joyce.
Ooh, I'm gonna go Rafael Devers and Ozzie Albies. Right too.
I can dig it.
That's it for us. You can check out dailyfantasycafe.com for all our great tools and content, and we'll see you guys on Monday.
Good luck tonight.